but all sorts of gimmicks. Yeah, and the dog, as I said, was my number 2 best friend, other than my imagination. And I'd lose my temper. Something would go wrong. And I had a vicious temper at that point in life. And I'd get mad, so I'd take it out on the poor old dog, Toby. Give him the blast of shit, and he'd go cowering off, you know. So he'd run into the little bush north of the house, and I never really knew where he went. I didn't care. So after a while, dog would come back out. Ross had forgot about this, and we were buddies again till the next time. And at one point, I'd ski back to school. Talking about temper, I'd ski. I think in grade 8, I would start that. Before we went over to the 6th line, I was 10 when I went to 6th line. So yeah, I would ski over on a pair of skis I got for Christmas with leather harness and rubber boot combination. And they weren't too bad. I could make good time on that, skitter along, scoot down the hills. But when I was learning how to run them, I'd go out behind the barn. There were some gentle slopes out there, and I'd fall down. I'd take the poles and I'd start working on those skis. They were full of holes. They looked like it had chicken pox. I tell you, they were to the point that one day I was going out over the bank onto the road where the plow had gone along and snap, broke one right off. So that was the end of that set of skis. But a few things like that tended to cure you, of your temper, because it didn't matter how many times you hit the ski, you fell down next time as well. Yeah. It gradually sank in. So there was, I speak fondly of Hickory Falls, where the building is, the cabin. Now it's owned by Jimmy Sanderson's daughter, but people by the name of Bellier came out of Toronto when I was this age here, 2 maybe, and approached Father about buying that corner there with the falls, you see?
Yep.
And money was, you got your money where you could, and it certainly wasn't doing any good for an agricultural operation. So Dad said, sure. And whatever the deal was, I don't know, but the Belliers proceeded to cut the cedars down and build the cabin there. And they were extremely good friends for the rest of their lives. They had 3 sons, Joe, Barley, and Edwin. Edwin went into the Navy, Joe into the Army. He was the younger. Joe's there with me by the bum in the wheelbarrow. But it was always a favorite spot, and they would come up every weekend, and there would be beep, 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 beep as they came around the corner there, and we knew that the Bellies, boy, they arrived. So I'd probably run down and see how they're doing, so on. They gave me a coat that I'm wearing there, and another one that their boys are growing out of. This was a little brown tweed cap and coat, excellent little with wooden buttons, cross cut into the button.
Jerry had one of those when he was 3.
Maybe.
Tweed jacket with brown buttons.
It could have been the same one, to be honest with you. It might have got stored away over all those years. I don't know for sure, but it might well have been. Yeah. And they would bring up all sorts of stuff during, this was 39, and things were heating up around the world internationally. And 40, 42, through the beginning of the war, they'd bring up the National Geographic booklet. And in there was all sorts of pictures, you see, of African women, and all this stuff. At the back, there was pictures of all the different insignia that the U.S. military, different divisions, different platoons, different this, it was Air, Navy, Armed Ground Forces. They were all laid out in pictures. Fascinating. There'd be pictures of bears, there'd be pictures of little airplanes, all in these insignia. I can remember going through those, just it was fascinating for somebody that had no access to that type of thing before. Yeah, and then Boys' Own Annual. That was a big book that they were British, the Belliers, and they had these big books, and what wasn't in them wasn't worth a look at. The Gurkhas in India and all this sort of stuff. The world just kind of, fascinating. Couldn't read it all, but the pictures were great. So they were great friends. And then other people that we met through them, a lady by the name of Ann Davis. She worked for Bell Canada on the old switchboards when the cords were punched and pulled. She would come out and camp at Hickory, and eventually she was able to purchase it from the Belliers. And she and a guy by the name of Everett, and I can't remember his name, they lived there for 15, 20 years. And we're great friends of Mom and Dad's, and we'd always visit them when they were there too, but they've passed on. So that little corner is pretty special for, in my recollections, and always will be naturally. But
So now I know where that cabin came from.
yeah, that cabin came from there, and now of course the escarpment and the whatever, you know, you couldn't dare cut a tree in there. If it burnt down, I don't know whether you'd ever be able to put another
There's
one
a
up.
fella came around to Fallbrook one day. We were there, and has part of that property, maybe the eastern section of it, come in, and he said that they come in and asked him what he was doing. He was cutting some trees and whatever, and he said, I'm on my own property. I'm cutting my own trees. What do you got to say about it?
What are you doing on my property?
Yeah, and basically kicked them out, and he said there's never been a problem since.
That's probably the only thing they understand. Yeah, because if they think they can cower you, from my understanding, they'll drive you into the dirt.
But that has to be done by somebody who doesn't need them.
Oh yes, no, don't be in debt to them or
Yeah.
requesting anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
You want your title well signed and dried for
Yeah.
sure. But anyway, so that how are we doing, Aaron? Have we missed anything in your line of questions? As I said, I got rambling after I inquired about it.
I think it's
Okay.
gold.
You're okay?
Yes.
When you
No.
broke your leg, how'd you get to go?
Oh, I'd have been.
How long?
Yeah,
did
we
it
had
take
the.
you?
Well, let's see. I was 39, and that would be 4 years later. We'd end up going in the old Model T or something, I would guess. Not a pleasant ride, I'm sure. Fortunately, you don't remember those
Dusty
things.
sometimes.
Well, it was what time of the year? Yeah, it would have been in. Yeah, it wasn't summertime anyway. It wasn't dirty or snow rather. So I would suppose Dad had the Model T at that time. Model T story. The running board was so high that I could hardly get up. I'd have to get one knee up and then hoist myself to get the other one up, you see. And I had this propensity for losing socks. Only one sock of the pair. And, okay, we're going to go down, we're going someplace. Didn't matter. Okay, you ready, Ross? Well, I'm looking for my sock. Well, you know, hurry up, we got to go.
Where'd
You know?
you leave it?
And I remember the last time that I lost socks was running down the road with one sock on and a bare foot, hopping and trailing the old Model T, and it's going put, and there's ghosts in my face, and put. I'm running, bawling, trying to catch up to the car. Finally, Dad stopped, and I bailed in. But from then after, I've never lost a single sock. Put. Yeah, shit. Great thing. Oh, and in wintertime, around the corner from Fallbrook, there was people by the name of Gagey, I think, up in there. And I'm not sure who was before them, but there
Arthur.
was, maybe, it was in that property. Somebody had died there in the wintertime. And in those days, the wakes were held in the homes, usually. And I remember on the side road, coming across from 7 toward Hickory, the snow was at least 6-8 feet deep. And they had a big maintainer, in there with the wedge V-plow on the front. And it was so hard and packed in there that the guys were shoveling the crust at the top, breaking it with shovels, and the maintainer would back up and come up and hit that snowbank. And a bit of snow would fly and die. Gain 4 or 5 feet. They did this all the way around and up to the where the deceased was. I remember that, and I remember riding in the cutter from out to Silver Creek. You caught any friends that were coming for many years came on the bus and got off at Silver Creek. So you had to go out, or they walked in to our place. Later on, we'd go down to Georgetown and meet the train to put somebody on or to meet them coming off. And I was under 10, and I still remember the ground shaking at Georgetown Station when those big 4-wheel engines would come in there, just a smoking and a storm and a spitting, and the whole building shook, you know. And finally got her stopped. and whoever, you know, on or off, and then it was time to go, and I'd be always interested in looking in, and Dad would lift me up, and the engineer would kind of wave, sort of thing. And then it was time to go, you know. Well, then you didn't just start off easy with those old guys. Somehow or other, you had to give her a little shot of steam, and all four wheels went, and then they stopped, and you'd gain a wee bit. And this is how they got her going. And first thing, it was way down, it was a cloud of smoke. It was a great way. Yeah, a great way. And my uncle never married. He was quite a bit older than Dad, the oldest of my four aunts and uncles. During the war, he worked in Weston in one of the munitions plants. And he would come home or come up to the farm on the weekends. Friday night, he'd catch the bus to Silver Creek, and then he'd walk in. And he was my favorite uncle in that he had some time when he came to the farm. It was a bit of a break for him, you know. He didn't really plan on milking cows or whatever, but he'd play ball with me. He'd pitch the ball, and I'd try and swing at it with this old bat, and he'd laugh, and we'd run around, and we had a great time. It was always nice to see Uncle Bob coming up the road. I'd run out to meet him, and then he'd head out again on Sunday night to catch the bus back to Toronto for the next week. Yeah, as I say, ran bare feet. I could run down the middle of the gravel road bare feet, just flat out, and never hurt my feet because they got so tough by about the end of August, you know. It was and Mother, she'd have to go into bed or bathed once a week in the sink in that old house, standing up on the counter in a wash basin sort of thing, and then eventually enlarged into a tub, like a square wash tub. But the last thing was we'd have to go over the feet for thistles, and she'd have a needle. Oh. And I got my foot up there, and hold still, we just about got this now. And she's squeezing like hell, and then with the needle working on it. There it is, good. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's a big one. Get rid of that, and then we were going to look for some more. But they were tough by the time summer, and needle, even the thistles didn't hardly penetrate them.
Russ, the train.
Uh-huh.
Where did it come from?
Well, heading south. Heading east, actually. And vice versa. Yeah, it was the old... I'd be...
Going east to Toronto?
Going east to Toronto. CN? CP?
Yeah,
CN it would have been. Yeah.
Because there was also CP coming south, wasn't there?
It came a different direction. Yeah.
From Milton.
To Milton and Limehouse.
South, and the old radial red road, you've heard of that.
You remember that?
Oh yeah, I've written on that now, that the reconstruction thing over there, yeah. But no, Dad would talk about it, because that was the first, and it's mentioned in the history of the Price thing I've got there, that when it came through, the old radial railroad ran up to Guelph or somewhere, I'm not too sure where.
That's right.
I never saw it, yeah. So, I don't know, as I was growing up, I know Mum would be helping, as any farm wife did in those days, with the milking and the chores and so on. You know, we'd have, Dad did the chores after supper. Some folks do them before and eat later, but we ate supper first and then went to the chores in the barn, and I'd get stuck in a horse stall. They had a bit of a gate across the horse stall, and so Ross didn't get lost too far while he'd get stuck in there to spend the hour or so that we were working on the chores.
That was your playpen, eh?
Yeah, it was my playpen, yeah. And I've got pictures there of cats. I'm 3 years old, and I've got cats on my knee, and as I said to Patty the other night, as the old cat laid on my lap watching the curling, you know, I've had cats in my lap for 68 years. One time or another. Oh yeah, great buddies. Yeah, and the one old dog, it moved from the 8th line to the 6th line with us, and was over there for 2 or 3 years, whatever. But she was getting old. She was the first pup that I knew. Lost its hearing, and then it lost its eyesight. And one day I came home, and old Toby wasn't around. Dad said no, we had to put Toby down. So that was the end of Toby, and then we had a whole series of dogs after that that weren't up to too much. Dad had a bicycle. That was his transportation between the farm and high school in Georgetown. And he would ride down the 8th line to Georgetown and so on. And he would sometimes go down the 7th. I don't know what possessed him to come over and go down there. But anyway, and he got a second seat lined up on the crossbar. and it was somehow tied on there. And when we were going for the cows, why, okay, we're going for the cows, and I'd run over and he'd hoist me up on there. And we'd weave our way out, diddle around, up back the lane and bring the cows back up. That was an outing. And he would keep the groundhogs semi under control with a 22, so that was all his interest. Dad's got the gun, he's going to go catch some groundhogs here. So I'd be trucking along behind him looking for that. Mum would drive the team of horses while we were haying, and we had a hay loader on the 8th line. That was rather modern. And he'd get the hay raked up into windrows, as you call them, and then Mum would steer the team along the windrow, and the hay would be gathered up onto the wagon with the hay loader, and he would build the load around everybody. And when it was finished, I'd unhook. Well, I wasn't always there, but sometimes I would unhook the pin that held the hay loader, and then it was free to go. And then Dad would reach down with the pitchfork. The 3-pronged pitchfork, and he'd reach away down, I'd grab a hold of it, and then he'd hoist me up, and I'd go up the side of the hay lock, the load like this. It was the greatest feeling, because he was strong enough that my 40 pounds or 20 pounds or whatever, whee, just like a bit of a, up we'd go and bouncing right our way into the barn, and then we managed to get it in the barn after unload it. With he had a hay fork there, where you turn the team around, put it on there, and then used the hay loader to. It was a 2-prong deal that went into the hay and lifted up big bundles, and they hit the track at the top, and would swing over into the mow, and you pull a rope, and the 2 prongs on the bottom would open up, and the hay would fall off. So that worked pretty well.
So you loaded the hay loose?
Yes, yeah, and it was after the coil thing. My grandfather he coiled hay. Down at his place, after it's cut, you go around it and rake it into a nice little muffin-shaped thing, and that would run water off really well if you did it properly. Similar idea to stirring grain. Yeah, and he would put his hay up in the field like that until
You call it a coil?
Coil, yeah.
Coil.
And then you go around with the wagon, and that was all forked on by hand. So it was. Yeah.
And you're taking the oats or the wheat to the mill, the grist mill. Did you have a tab that you'd have to pay at the end of the season when the soldiers?
No, it was so much a bag. That's how Jim Kirkwood, how you paid for it. You brought in 10, and it was 10 cents or 25 cents. I don't recall what it was, but now I'm sure you're correct in that some people maybe didn't pay each time, and they might have waited till the end of the month or whatever the negotiation might have been with Jim. I don't know.
Because not everybody had a milk quota, so they wouldn't all get paid.
That's true. It varied. There's no doubt about that.
Some people left part of the grain as payment for.
Yeah, that's a barter thing too. Yeah, you service rendered, you kept part of that grain. Dad didn't operate that way. Dad was very. He didn't do much that he couldn't pay for. Yeah.
Need the feed.
Yeah, it took her back for the pigs. What was I going to say? Eventually, in the mill here, Jim had a big diesel engine. You remember that? Were you down in there?
I remember
hearing
it run.
That big green diesel. The thing was from here to Megan long and on some cement forms, but it was a high thing. And we'd arrive and he might not be running, so we'd go down and he'd get that thing going. Well, that was an interesting exercise, because that old girl, once she started, it was and it built up momentum, and then away it went, and the whole